Morning, everybody. This is Edye Schwartz from NYAPRS. I see 100 of you are on, but we're expecting quite a few more. So we're just going to wait a few more minutes as everybody gets on the phone. We've got a great webinar for you today from our friends at the Office of Mental Health. And I'm just still seeing my numbers clicking on. So I'm going to give it another minute or two to get started. And then we'll let you know what's happening here today. You should see on the screen your agenda, and so you can see what we're going to go over today and who's with us. Boy, we've got quite the crowd, so we'll just give it another minute because these numbers are still spinning around on my screen as people come in. And I'd like everyone to be here before I turn it over to Harvey to lay out why we've invited you here today. We'll just give it one more minute, and then we'll get started because we do have a full program. You guys, you might want to mute till you go on.
Okay.
Well, we're up to 123, so we'll give it just another 30 seconds, and we'll get started with our intros. Well, for those of you who are just joining us, hi, it's Edye. This is Edye Schwartz from NYAPRS, and so happy to welcome you this morning to our webinar to deal with some issues that we have heard about pros experiencing. We have a lot of folks still coming on, but I think we're going to get started because we have a big agenda today, and it's my pleasure to turn this over to Harvey Rosenthal to speak with us. Harvey?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. And thank you, Edye, and thank you to OMH, and thank you to MCTAC. I think we're presenting this through our contract with OMH, the training collective, or perhaps our work with MCTAC, but we all work very closely together, and this is an important topic, and we're really glad that so many of you have joined us. And I really just wanted to stop and thank you all for your hard work and your good work every day. We get so often busy into all the issues, all the challenges and problems. I just thought it'd be important to thank you for your work, and our hope today is to look at how we can make sure we're serving all the people we can, and that your programs are as strong and as well financed as possible. I just want to also say that NYAPRS, by the way, we're going to be getting a briefing a bit later today from the commissioner at the Office of Mental Health, and we'll probably have out an updated budget sample, a budget summary. And on February 28th, those of you that are NYAPRS members, please do come to Albany for our annual legislative day. And for those of you who would like to be, you can go to our homepage at the top. So I attend some regular meetings. I represent you and our members, and I attend these regular meetings with the Office of Mental Health, the Department of Health, OASIS. And at one of the meetings, the OMH staff shared the following information, that effective November 21st of last year, that the PROS programs were seeing their claims denied 27%, at a rate of 27% in New York City, and a rate of 24% for the rest of the state. So we were very concerned that 1/4 of your bills are being denied, and we were speculating, is it the way that you folks are billing? Is it the managed care plans who are inappropriately sort of denying? or if they are denying, can we understand why? So we in the Office of Mental Health really wanted to drill down, and MCTAC really wanted to drill down on that, and you'll get some information today about billing. But I also wanted to point out that the other concern, as important, that's more so, is that the amount of billing and potentially the amount of people or the frequency was only at 59% of historical sort of volume in New York City and 47% in the rest of the state. So if you put those two together, we're really concerned, are you serving all the people that you want to and who are out there who need the services? Are you seeing them as frequently as is appropriate and desired by them? And when you're billing, how can we help make sure that you get all of the billables that are required here? So I'm going to turn this back to Edye, who's the director of our Division of System Transformation, and she'll take it from here. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Harvey. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We do have a ton of people. We have 150 people on the line. So when that happens, we can't, unfortunately, have an interaction, even though we way prefer to be able to hear you talk, but we can't. So we do have you all muted, and we are going to have time for questions and discussion. And the best way to do that is to type your question in the chat box, which should either be on the right or on top of your screen or on the left. Somewhere in your screen it says chat. And if you type or questions, if you see the spot that says questions, type your question in that question box, and I will then be able to get the questions and give them to our presenters today. And also, along with our presenters from OMH, we also have Andy Kleek from MCTAC, and so Boris and Andy have also worked with many of you around these issues, and so they were kind enough to join us as well today to be able to make sure that they can answer your questions and be there for follow-up. Anything we don't get to, we're going to give to our presenters, and they're going to answer them, and I'm going to mail it all back to you. We're also recording this today, so we can send you the link for folks who weren't able to be on the phone. So, so make sure that as you're going, if you're anything like me, you're going to forget your question by the time it ends. Just type your question in the minute you have it, even if it's been answered later on. I'll go through the questions, and if I see the question's been answered, you know, I'll leave it be. So just type in your question. Don't be afraid. There's no stupid, foolish questions. These are difficult issues. Just type in any question you have. Please don't be embarrassed about your questions, because you can be sure there's another 25, 30 people who have the same question. So with that, I just want to say that that we will be starting our webinar shortly, and I'm happy to have with me today Doug Ruderman, Liam McNabb, and Jonathan Sarshell from the Office of Mental Health, all of the folks who are working on these issues with transforming our PROS programs and moving over into managed care. And as I mentioned, also with us is Andy Kleek from the Nick Silver Institute for Poverty Policy and Research, and the ruler of MCTAC. It's my pleasure to work. It's my pleasure to work with all. There seems to be an echo, Julie, for some reason, which we'll get rid of in a minute. And at this point, Julie, you can move the slides over to the OMH slide, and we will get started with I think Doug is going to begin. And again, don't forget to write your questions in immediately when you think of them. So it's my pleasure now to turn this over to Doug Ruderman.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Edye, and thank you, Harvey, for putting this together, you know, so that we can address some of the issues or data that we've seen and see whether or not it's an issue or what's going on, and also to be able to provide all of our PROS community with some new information now that we're transitioning into managed care. Now, myself, many of you know me for a long time. I was one of the people that worked on PROS at the very inception of it and helping to create it and get it started. And my role now is really as a kind of managed care and behavioral health technical assistance person. And so this is the meeting of my past world and my present world. So I hope that I don't get in trouble if I see myself in these time movies. I make stupid comments as I go along, but we'll move forward. So, you know, all of you that have been involved with PROS know that we created it to substantially change the way that we provided services in New York State. We needed a vehicle where we had really good and integrated rehabilitation services and treatment services, and that was really our goal. And we really changed the foundation and the structure of how we funded many different programs and program codes. And because of that, it became very complex, not only from a program perspective, but also from a claiming perspective, a financial perspective. And I think that Liam, who's been involved with PROS forever, also will agree that you know, that even before we added in the complexity of managed care, even in just the fee-for-service world, there were always a lot of issues around claiming, and if people were claiming correctly or claiming everything that they were entitled to. So this is just another wrinkle in this as we go forward. So if you go to the next slide, please. Okay, maybe get, oh, there we go. Okay, so this is probably a timely example. I know I'm getting all my tax stuff in the mail all the time. I get my W-2 or your, you know, 1099 or whatever different tax stuff that you happen to get, you receive. And many people don't actually sit down with a piece of paper and do their taxes anymore. They use, you know, these tax programs on their computer, or they use a financial person, or sometimes they might endeavor to do it themselves. But the example here is that as a program person, or as somebody who lives in America that pays taxes, you collect a lot of information. But you really need to understand what you do and the information that you receive, how that all works. So this slide where I talk about program people and budget people is really to try to make sure and to focus a light on the fact that you really need to know, if you're a program person, you really need to know a little bit about how your program is funded and financed and how it gets reimbursed in order for you to really manage your program and manage your day. And on the other hand, budget people really have to have an opportunity to see your program, to see how it operates, to see how it works, so that the two hands can work together and speak to each other and really find out how to provide the best service to an individual. But we're in a real world, and the salaries have to be paid, the heat has to be on, the lights have to be on, so, and how to get the revenue that you're entitled to so that your program can continue to do the good things that it does with the individual it serves. Next slide, please. So in this transition to managed care, and I think we're going to move to the next slide. So I'll start talking and then
you want to move?
Yeah,
oh,
there you go. Okay.
I apologize.
Oh no, that's okay. That's okay. So as the slide here it says, we're transitioning from a purely fee-for-service system into a system in which some of the people that you serve in your PROS program remain in the fee-for-service system, and others are moving into a Medicaid managed care system. And that complicates the finances even more, because now you not only need to understand the fee-for-service world, but now you have to get yourself involved in the managed care world, which necessitates two things. And most of you, I hope, if not all of you, have already completed both of these tasks, which is that you need to contract with managed care organization, and you also need to get credentialed with the managed care organizations in your catchment area. I think most of you have done that. I hope it wasn't too painful. For those people that hadn't been involved with Medicaid managed care previously, for the most part, for most of our PROS programs would have been agencies that had clinics, might have had some prior experience with managed care organizations, but other than that, most agencies probably had it. It was a whole new world, and I apologize that we put this upon you, but it seems like almost everybody is claiming something. So people must have claiming something to managed care, so people must have some contracts and be credentialed with some plans. It's important to try to get contracted and credentialed with all the plans in your area, because as you're working with individuals, if they happen to be in a managed care plan that you're not contracted with, then you have to go through an even more arduous process of going into like the, what is it called, the single case agreement if you're going to get paid for that individual. So that leads us to, you really need to know how to communicate with the managed care organization and their staff. So next slide, please. Now, all this information I'm going to talk about, I think that especially Jonathan is going to get into a little bit more detail than I'm talking about. But this is really kind of, I'm just trying to give you a tops of the trees kind of thing. So, how does each managed care organization expect to be communicated with? Because they're not all the same. There's a lot of different companies out there. Some companies might have a PROS expert, utilization management person. Another company might have a generalist that may not know that much about PROS or may know more about PROS. And by the way, we're also going to be trying to help to continue to educate the plans so they understand what the PROS program looks like. And if a plan asks if they can come and visit your program, please let them send people to come visit it, because the more they understand the program and see it, I think the smoother all of this communication will be. So how does each managed care organization authorize services for your PROS program? Okay, so because PROS program, as I said earlier, is complex. You have a base rate. You have your add-ons, which are the IR, the OR, and the clinic component. There's a lot of different things that have to get that have to get authorized. Are they authorizing you for units of service over months, or are they saying we're only going to authorize a month at a time? And each plan might be a little bit different. The Office of Mental Health has provided some guidance to the plans regarding authorization for PROS programs. We try to tie it to the timing of when you need to do your new rehabilitation IRPs. And so we're trying to make this as simple as possible and to time it up with all the things that you have to do for your PROS program, whether somebody's in fee-for-service or managed care. Does your electronic health record, EHR, or your electronic billing system, and what I should say is an EHR is a combination of an electronic billing system and an electronic medical record, but whatever you have, whether it's one or the other or both, do they communicate with your managed care organization? We talked about testing a long time ago. Well, there's no more testing. We're in the world of live claiming, but there could be issues particular to your software system and how it will or will not communicate well with the managed care organization. So, you know, I think that we're going to talk about that a little bit more detail later on, also about, you know, making sure that your system is communicating appropriately. And then we're going to talk a little bit later, when I say we, I mean Jonathan, because I don't know anything about this. I had never heard of a clearinghouse until we got involved with this, which happens to be this thing that some people use that is between the program and the plan. So there may be another entity living between those that John's going to talk about. So next slide. Yeah, thank you. So if we start out logically, and this is really what I want, and I hope, no, back one slide. Yes, thank you. So this is really what I hope that you're going to do, and Harvey touched on this a little bit. You really need to know on an average month, back in 2015, how much on average per month revenue based on the month of claim, not on the month you're paid. You should look at the month that you claim, the month of service. How much revenue were you receiving on average per month? Because you should be receiving on average about the same amount of revenue now. We did not change the rates. Okay, there are government rates, and the managed care organization is paying you the exact same amount that the fee-for-service system paid you. But if you're not looking at what you got paid historically and comparing it to what you're getting paid now per month, based on service month, because you want to kind of compare apples to apples, then you don't know whether or not you're really missing bills. This is one simple way of seeing whether or not your revenue's gone down, and if your revenue has gone down, that just means that you're not getting as many claims paid. So we really think that this is logically something that you should all be doing. And then my last slide, next slide please, is kind of just knowing your payer mix also. You know, we think that we have a good idea of how many people in your program should be in the fee-for-service system and how many should be in the managed care, Medicaid managed care system. But we're looking at this from a distance. You should be looking at it right up close. You should know when you go into e-paces who's in fee-for-service and who's in managed care. If people are in managed care, it should be telling you that they're in managed care and what their plan is. So you really have to take a look at that payer mix. How many people in your program do have Medicaid managed care? Is that, you know, are you getting paid the same percentage of claims that you submit for people in Medicaid managed care than you are in fee-for-service Medicaid? And then, you know, you really just need to take a look at and manage this number of people that you have, those people in managed care. How many members are in each of the managed care organizations that you're contracted with? Because what you might find is that for whatever reason, whether it's the plan or whether it's you might be more successful in getting a higher percentage of your claims paid with Medicaid managed care organization 1 versus Medicaid managed care organization 2, which would point you toward really looking at what's going on in your claiming system for Medicaid managed care system 2. So that's really my little introductory piece. We're going to go on to Jonathan, I think, now.
Yes, thanks, Doug. This is Jonathan Sauershelf from the Office of Mental Health, and I'll echo Doug's comments, thanking Harvey and Edye and everyone for this today. We hope this is very useful and helpful. Some of you, probably most of you, don't know me personally. You may know me through my alias as the OMH Managed Care Mailbox. That's me. You know, it's basically what everybody else calls me around here. You may have also worked with Melissa Gnedlow in the past. I'm the new Melissa. She has moved on to another position, so I'm the new Melissa, and you can sort of look at me in that light as well if you remember Melissa. So what I'm going to do here is kind of go over some claim information, some issues that we have seen crop up from various angles, and then maybe some action steps that can be taken to help sort of get you on the right path. So hopefully this will be a good primer for you. Next slide, please. Great. This kind of echoes what Harvey was saying in his introduction, our claims data. So we do a biweekly claims report since the rollout of the behavioral health benefits into managed care. We do it both for New York City and for rest of state. What it does is it's a cumulative report going back to the date of the transition, so October 1st, 2015 for New York City, July 1st, 2016 for the rest of state. And we have also taken to pulling data to show the volume of claims to managed care versus the estimated amount, or actually the real amount to fee-for-service for the year, for the same period of time but the year prior. So it's, you know, October 2014 through until 2015, and then July 2015 until 2016. And kind of just to give you a sense on how we do that so you understand our methodology, we take the current plan enrollment and then we look at their claims volume through Medicaid fee-for-service for that previous year, because we have that data that we can pull from Medicaid fee-for-service. And then we get the plan reported claim data for the managed care portion of it. So while it doesn't give us an exact number, there is always going to be discrepancies. It gives us a sense of where the trends may lie. And as you can see on this slide, in New York City, we're showing approximately through December 19th of 2016 that there's been 63% of the volume from the previous year for fee-for-service. So it is down almost 40%. And again, not necessarily exact. There is going to be discrepancies in any sort of data pull, but it does give us a sense that the volume seems to be down. And this is the volume of claims submitted to the managed care plan. For rest of state, for everywhere outside of New York City, it's at 49%. So it's basically half the volume. And sort of that's where our starting point was. Is we saw these numbers in, you know, immediately are thinking, is there a problem that we need to look into? And if so, where does that problem lie? So that kind of gives you a sense on where our thinking started from and how, and sort of where we determine our next steps. If you could go to the next slide, please. And so we then began to look into where the problems may lie. And in the process of doing that, through the inquiries and complaints that I receive through the OMH managed care mailbox, through talking with providers and talking with some of our, our partners in other areas, including billers, and talking with the health plans, there is potential areas for improvement on multiple levels. And those levels are provider submission, clearinghouse, which Doug had mentioned, and I will get into sort of what that is and where those problems may lie. And then, obviously, the plans. There are concerns with the plans, and there's things the plans can do better, too. And so I'm going to touch on all of those. Next slide, please. The first part is the provider submission process. And in some ways, this is the easiest part because you can control this directly. This is something you have direct control over what you do. And as you're taking the proper steps up front, then it's much easier for us to identify where the problems may lie. Because if you're doing things right, then we know the problem isn't with you. But it is always a good opportunity to sort of put out there and a reminder of, proper billing techniques. Use your proper billing codes and modifiers. We have that information on a coding taxonomy. That is the web link. It's a spreadsheet on that page, but it'll be right on that page called coding taxonomy. That's our Bible. That's what we went to the plans with and said, this is how the providers are going to bill. It'll have the rate codes, the procedure codes, your modifiers, and the unit numbers, and that's very important. Bill with the appropriate number of units. This is how we train the plans. because in a sense we had to train the plans on these benefits too, and we had to go to them and tell them, this is what's being billed, this is how they're going to bill it, this is how we expect you to process it. So if you're billing appropriately, then we know that the issue isn't going to be on the provider side. It could be the plan not processing it appropriately, and I'll touch upon that in a little bit. But bill with the appropriate number of units, bill using the last day of the month as the date of service. It's like Doug used earlier, it's really month of service, and that's a good way to think of it. It's not that you don't bill for the individual date, you bill on the last day of the month for the services during that month. That's, again, very important. That's how the plans are going to process it. That's how we expect them to process it, and that's what we're holding them to. And as long as those steps are being taken on your end, then we can go to the plan and say, the providers are doing this correctly, what's going wrong with you? And then the final thing is the guidance for the unlicensed practitioner ID. This was a guidance that we put out in right before the rollout in New York City in the fall of 2015 regarding billing claims in the attending physician field. There is, because your staff, they don't necessarily have practitioner IDs. So we developed an unlicensed practitioner ID. There's one for OMH, one for OASAS for applicable services there. And that is kind of a catch-all for those billing those services. The plans have to adhere to that. They have to accept that. They have to process claims with that ID on it. And if that's a guidance that we can certainly get out to you if you don't have, and it's something we can circulate. It is a very important piece of guidance that, again, we went to the plans with and said that you need to follow this. There is no option. If you want to be ready to administer these benefits for the New York State, this is part of the process. Next slide, please. Clearinghouses. This is sort of a new thing for a lot of people, and I think even here at OMH we've had to learn on the fly what exactly these are and what is happening with clearinghouses. So the general what clearinghouses in general are is they operate between the providers and the payers, in this case the plans. So a provider will submit their claims sometimes to a clearinghouse, and the clearinghouse's role is to review the claims, the batch submission claims. So a batch of 20, 50, however many claims, the clearinghouse will review that to see that there is, like, the addresses are on it, that it meets basic billing protocols, that it meets billing parameters. Basically, they scrub it, is the term we use. The clearinghouse will scrub that claim to make sure it's clean, and then they can pass that claim to the health plan. If you could go back one, sorry. Thank you. What happens and where some of the problems lie is that the clearinghouse, they put edits on their system. So they put, because it's all computerized, so they put an edit on their system within their computer system to prevent some claims from getting through. It'll basically reject it back to the submitter, so back to the provider, for a reason, and that reason can vary. It could be an issue with the number of units because, again, PROS is different than some other unit or some other programs, and because of that, these clearinghouses, which can be national clearinghouses, are not necessarily aware or understand how to process the benefits for such a unique program and for certain things about New York State. There is also an issue that we ran into with them having an edit in place that blocked it for going through because of the unlicensed practitioner ID. Because of the way that's billed electronically, it creates an issue. It has created an issue in clearinghouses systems, and they're saying, well, this field's missing, this field's inappropriate, and they'll reject it back to the provider. The sort of what you can do about it, and sort of the way to look at this is providers often have, you actually hire clearinghouses. Some of you may have clearinghouses, and that's a contractual relationship between the provider and the clearinghouse. New York State doesn't have direct oversight over the clearinghouses. They are a business separate from, separate from the plan, separate from our contractual oversight. We are sort of having to learn on the fly how to work around and work through these issues with the clearinghouses. But I will state, if you have a relationship with a clearinghouse, if you know, or if you're not even certain, but look into it and you find out you have a work with a clearinghouse, that's your clearinghouse. You hired them, and in that case, you do have contractual power over them. It's your money that's been paying for them because they are being hired for a fee to review these claims. There is an occurrence where plans have their own clearinghouses. So what can happen is a plan will have a clearinghouse as well to help get these claims, quote unquote, clean in order to process them. So I would stress that the providers, you would need to ensure that your clearinghouse is not putting these edits on file. I think we learned lessons from the New York City transition that we were able to apply to the rest of the state, and I think we were able to educate at that time. But it's still sort of this nebulous, like, middle world that we're not 100% can get a grasp on. You know, so if you have your own clearinghouse, make sure they're not putting these edits on file. Make sure they're not blocking your claims because of the unlicensed practitioner ID, because of the number of units, or some other reason that should be allowed. And I would also then state that now, if the plans do have their own clearinghouse, that's where you and New York State can work with these plans to ensure that their, what's known as their EDI department, basically their computer folks, can work with their clearinghouse to make sure there's no edits on file.
Just one thing I wanted to add is if the clearinghouse that you hired bounces the claim back to you because it wasn't clean, from a timely claiming perspective, that claim was never submitted.
That is, thank you, Doug. Yes, that is true. The timely filing, if you get your claim to the plan itself, if it gets through to the plan and the plan then processes it and either denies it or makes some sort of decision on that claim, but at least received it in-house and generates a claim number in the plan system, then you submitted that claim. Timely filing in that case does not necessarily apply. But if getting rejected by the clearinghouse, be it your clearinghouse, the plan's clearinghouse, the plan never got that claim for whatever reason. The plan can still state that you didn't submit timely. They've never received it, and that's where there can be some troubles there. So that's a great point. As long as the plan gets that claim, then timely filing, it really isn't the concern. But we got to get it through the clearinghouse first. Next slide, please. And speaking of the plans, there's certainly been issues with the plans. I think throughout this process, we've learned that the plans have had technical and sort of administrative issues that have to be worked around and have had to be worked through. And as much as we thought we had a handle on these, they still crop up. There has been multiple occurrences where plans are not processing with the correct amount of units. This could be a system issue on their end. Their system can't process multiple units appropriately or in an electronic manner. So they'll get the claim in and the system will automatically reject it because the automatic processing of their claim system sees the multiple units and can't accept it. It can't handle it. The plans have to find a way around that, be it a manual process, be it some workaround. Sometimes these systems they're using have to, maybe they're a few years old and they weren't necessarily set up for some of these peculiarities, but ultimately the plans have to get a way around that. But there might be occurrences where they're issuing denials because of the units issue. We would stress in those cases, do not change the way you bill. If bill per our coding taxonomy, bill the appropriate amount of units as stated by Office of Mental Health, and then we can make sure the plans, and we meaning Office of Mental Health, New York State Department of Health, we can then make sure the plans find a way around that to process it appropriately and get you your payment. Don't change your billing process for the plans. The plans have to figure it out. The second thing that comes up with the plans, they're not correctly authorizing services, and this somewhat goes to the units issue. It somewhat goes to the various components of PROS. They're just not sure. They're still, in a way, some of them are still learning. When we trained their staff and did our reviews of the plans before the transition, we told them and we taught them and we educated them on what needed to be done and how the benefits work. They've had new staff that have come in since. They maybe are still uncertain about about PROS and how it works on all of the levels. So that can create problems with authorizations. They're not authorizing on the appropriate time frame. They're not authorizing the correct amount of units. They're not handling it in the appropriate way. I know from our end, we are actually going to be doing a very focused training with the plans about PROS within the next month. And we are working with them on a regular basis. If there's questions that come up, we ask them to ask us questions too if they're having issues. But if they're having trouble authorizing those services, that could cause an issue. In that case, at the end, we'll give you sort of resources. Please work with Office of Mental Health. We'll work with Department of Health as need be, and to help them understand what they need to do. There are occurrences where the plans are not giving technical assistance to the providers. Maybe you're trying to bill. Maybe you have a question of the plan regarding your authorization, and they're not getting back to you. That's wrong. Point blank, that's inappropriate. If you're a contracted and credentialed provider with the plan, if you're an in-network provider or have had a service authorized through some sort of single case agreement, the plan has to work with you. They have to be able to provide you with technical assistance if there's questions and concerns. And it really should be at least a semi-regular thing. We're hearing occurrences where plans just aren't doing that. That's disappointing. And while they are human beings just like all of us, the expectation is they find a way to help our providers within an appropriate time frame. On a technical level, they have not always updated the provider contract. So, if you're a participating provider with a plan, you've signed a contract with them, you should have then signed this contract, gone through this credentialing process, and the plans then, will basically allow you to submit to them. They will then process your claims as an in-network provider and pay at the appropriate rates. Sometimes plans, and they delay in this, sometimes due to backlog, sometimes due to other issues, sometimes due to just various human things. They don't always update the contract in their system timely. So they'll get your contract, you know you're participating, you're in network with that health plan, and they have not updated in their system your NPI information, the rates that are attached to your provider information, because the way their system works is the claim gets submitted, it matches up against your provider information, and then internally attached to that provider information there's a set of rates. They might have not updated that, and again, they should have, but they might not have. That's why sometimes you might get denials that say, NPI not valid, or something along those lines. And that's oftentimes where that comes from. They haven't updated something internally to sort of link your provider profile to the appropriate payment rates, then it causes a denial. And then one of the other things, and I touched upon it before, is the plan clearinghouse. The plans have their own clearinghouses sometimes, and their edits have not updated. In that case, and this kind of goes in conjunction with the technical assistance piece, if the plan's clearinghouse is preventing your claim from getting through to them, that the plan has a contract with that clearinghouse. And since the plan also has an expectation from New York State and as part of their contract with you as a provider to assist, they need to work appropriately with their EDI department and their clearinghouse to get those edits removed, to get those blockages out of the way so your claims can get through. Because they are expected as health plans to accept the claims the way that they're supposed to be billed per our coding taxonomy and per our billing manual from the New York State Office of Mental Health. Whatever they have to do to make that happen, they got to talk to their clearinghouse, that's fine, but they need to do it. And one other thing, I didn't put it on here, but we mentioned it before, there have been issues where plans have not accepted the unlicensed provider ID, and it's not necessarily a clearinghouse issue, it's their issue as a plan. They say, we can't accept this claim because it doesn't have a ID in this field. They have to accept it. They are all aware of this fact. It doesn't mean there still isn't system issues where it's denying, but they are all aware that they need to accept this. There's no argument from them on that, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen due to other technical issues. But there's various issues coming with the plans. And sort of one final thing, sometimes their staff just doesn't know what PROS is. And kind of touching on the authorizing the services, they get in new customer service staff, they get in new authorization staff. And while they are expected to include in their internal trainings what PROS is and sort of the process. Sometimes those people either didn't get the full training, didn't pay attention, or just uncertain. The training may be inadequate from the plan's end. There could be a gap there. So sometimes it's a simple matter of somebody just doesn't know. They're supposed to. We, again, will work with them to make sure that trainings are updated, that gaps are filled in their training processes. Next slide, please. Okay, and so here's a few action steps. I've really kind of touched upon some of these already, but I will sort of just go over them again. From your end and what you can control, follow the OMH Billing Manual and Coding Taxonomy. Those are available on our website. We will provide a link for them at the end, and we would stress use those, have those, keep those nearby. Those are very important. Keep that web page bookmark. That way, if there's an update, you'll be able to see it and get it. That's what we use. That's what we then give to the plans. That's how we then communicate. If Department of Health needs to get involved, that's what we tell DOH how it's supposed to go, so DOH can then hit the plans with that. Those are the two most important things. If you have a clearinghouse, follow up with them to ensure that they're allowing your claims to pass through. Sometimes it's just a matter of a quick question or a quick update. Hey, I know you're a clearinghouse. This is how PROS is billed. Can you make sure you're not blocking it because of the unlicensed practitioner ID? Sometimes it's a very simple fix. Sometimes it's more complicated, but sometimes it can be worth just a quick phone call if you have a clearinghouse. And again, that would be your clearinghouse, your contractual relationship with them. If there is a problem with a clearinghouse that isn't yours, you can follow up with the managed care organization. Follow up with the plan. Ask them to speak with known as their EDI department. They all have this department, and to check with their clearinghouse on their end to make sure there's no blockages. You can definitely follow up with them. It is part of the expectation that you will, you can talk with the plans. The plans then will have to help you appropriately, and they should be able to communicate with you on that and follow up internally on their end to see if there's any issues. Ensure you are contracted and credentialed with a plan. Sometimes there is confusion. I signed a contract, but am I fully set up in their system? Maybe you haven't been credentialed yet, which is sort of the step 2 of the contracting process. So sometimes you just want to double check that. If you have any questions about your status, we can always answer those. We do those network reviews with the health plans, and we can then double check the way they're reporting your status. If you're not sure and you can't figure it out and you can't get a hold of the plan, come to us. We can definitely help and kind of answer some of those questions as well. Submit the claims to the managed care plans following the appropriate guidance, the unlicensed practitioner ID. If you need that guidance, we can definitely send that out. I think it's going to be on the website. I think the link came down, but we're going to put it back up. But we can always send it out to you as well. That guidance is appropriate. You should probably keep that right with your billing manual and your coding taxonomy. And kind of the last thing you can do is you receive a rejection or if you receive a claim back, there's a difference between a denial from the plan where they'll send an explanation of benefits or explanation of payments, and it'll say that on the top. It'll have the plan logo, it'll say explanation of benefits, and it'll give you a denial reason. That's from the plan. That means the plan got your claim, they rejected it, they denied it, sorry, for a reason. However, if you get a rejection and it's not directly from the plan, so you submit a claim, it goes to the clearinghouse, and a day later it comes back, that's a rejection from your clearinghouse, and that's different than a denial because they're just rejecting it through a systems thing. And that means that there's an issue with the clearinghouse, be it your clearinghouse or the plan's clearinghouse. But either way, the plan's not getting that claim, and that's where you could run into timely filing concerns as well. So note those differences. The plan will send you something that has their logo on it and says explanation of benefits, explanation of payment. A rejection from the clearinghouse will not have those identifiers. That is something different. And I think once you start to see those, if you run into that, you'll understand the difference, and you can take different steps as needed. And then the final thing, please contact OMH and or Department of Health with any issues. We would stress, attempt to work with the plans around an issue. Give them a couple weeks, a little bit of time to work on it. Sometimes they just have a systems problem. Sometimes it's a simple human error. They're humans like you and I, but don't give them too much time. Don't give them months. Don't give them eternity. If you have questions, problems with the plan and you feel like it's not being resolved, please come to us. And actually, if you can go to the, I think it's on the next slide, the last slide. Thank you. Yep, and it's right on there at the bottom there, the OMH Managed Care email address. That's me, basically. Hopefully it'll be more than just me in the future, but it is me. So if you have a question, you know, and it's not just for complaints, it's questions, it's inquiries, it's follow-up, it's just if you're uncertain about something, please ask me. We'll be happy to help, and if we need to involve our subject matter experts, you know, I work with Liam, I work with whoever to find those answers for you. And that's the link for our billing manual, and then the page where our coding taxonomy is located. Save those, use those. They're very helpful. It is what we hold the plans to. It's what DOH holds the plan to, because we work directly with Department of Health as needed, since they have the contractual oversight on the plan. So I work directly with DOH on a daily basis on any sort of provider issues that come up regarding a health plan. And that's what we use, and that's what DOH uses to go to the plans and say, you need to process this correctly. So keep those, use those. That is probably the most important thing. And again, if you have any questions, concerns, certainly email us. And I think I'm turning it over to Liam now to finish this off.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Jonathan. I think what's important to note is the way you can use that managed care mailbox as well. And so what we'd like to hear as well are situations where programs have resolved a challenge with their managed care organization, so that, number one, we know that something was resolved, and number two, it'll help us kind of inform the technical assistance we provide going forward. And as Jonathan said, we're all working closely together to make sure that your programs are getting paid for what you're doing, which is all part of this effort to work with the pros community around capturing and all the services you deliver and getting paid for the services you deliver from the managed care organizations, along with us educating the managed care organizations about the pros model, the nuances of the pros model, and the billing methodology in the pros model. I think that the priority here is that the participants that we serve have access to and receive quality services that can help move someone toward a healthier well-being. But the business side of this is critical, because we want to make sure that each of you have strong practices in place and businesses in place to be able to continue to serve people. So the slides I'm going to cover are consistent with the quality improvement work that we've done for probably 18 to 20 months or so in the pros community to prepare your programs for managed care. We've done a great deal of this work since. And it's around kind of program operations. The work we did in the community was looking at your schedules to see if you had a robust offering of services, how you're using staff, and how you're capturing services so that you can bill for those. And what we're going to talk about here is billing analysis. And I think that kind of what's the overarching theme here is that what's important for you to do is compare program enrollment to utilization, and then comparing your utilization to billing. And in addition to that, an important theme here that Doug touched on, and I'll repeat moving forward, is that it is critical for program leadership and program staff to communicate with fiscal and finance staff on a regular basis. So routine reviews and analysis are important, and so using your existing resources to review and monitor data, and that includes your electronic medical record and CARES, which we'll talk more about. Comparing CARES registration to billing claims, and the example I have on the slide is the total number of Medicaid recipients to the total number of base claims in the tiers. So while CARES captures Medicaid recipients, you can compare utilization history and how you're billing and who you're billing for to enrollment. And as Doug said, an important part of this is knowing your payer mix, knowing who you're serving, and knowing the funding sources to support the work that you're providing to these individuals. And again, are you working with your billing and finance staff? Next slide, please. So again, with CARES, comparing the CARES registration to billing claims and looking at tiers. Over there. Okay, so what's the breakdown of tiers in your program, and is it consistent with daily attendance and group services? So An example of something that we saw quite often in visiting many of your programs are a high percentage of individuals in tiers 1 and 2, which to me means you're doing a terrific job at helping people develop the appropriate skills and resources to be independent in the community. But then we'll hear that a significant percentage of your pros participants are there every day. So having someone in your program every day is not equal to billing for tiers 1 and 2, which demonstrates low utilization. So an internal analysis is something we'd recommend there to determine if there's a gap. It's also helpful to sample caseloads. So talk to your staff, look at each of their caseloads to see who is there based on their IRP, based on utilization, just to make sure that, again, it's consistent with what you're billing for. Another important element here is, are you capturing everything? The sign-in, sign-out sheets for your program, people coming into your program every day and leaving your program every day. Are staff documenting services? Are they capturing individual contacts so that you can then bill for that as the pros units accumulate during the course of the calendar month? IRP planning, concurrent documentation, not only is it a best practice and a recommended practice, it's a billable service. So engaging somebody to complete your progress note, engaging somebody to talk more about reviewing their recovery plan is important to participation and engagement, but it's also billable. So hopefully your program and staff are capturing that as a service, which then, again, translates into pros units, which helps your bottom line. And of course, engagement. Engaging people through your robust schedule, engaging people through the recovery process and planning process creates better outcomes, but also, again, helps your ability to capture and bill pros units. Next slide, please. So some more CARES analysis. Reviewing the component enrollment for clinic treatment. How many individuals in your program are enrolled in the clinic treatment component in your program, and how many of those clinic treatment claims have you submitted or are about to submit for that month? Again, you'll need to spend some time looking at the payer mix to determine if there's a gap there. But these are systems that you already have in place that can help you better identify your utilization and whether or not you're being paid for the services you're delivering. And the same for IR. Looking at individuals eligible for IR, individuals that may have one of the 4 or a couple of the 4 IR services on their plans, and is that equal to claims submitted for IR and the billing? And just a reminder, the intensive rehabilitation component has the 4 services. It's an intensive rehabilitation goal acquisition, IDDT, intensive relapse prevention, and family psychoeducation. So spend some time, again, looking at caseloads of your staff, seeing who received an IR service and if it's consistent with the claims that you're submitting. And I think that also what's important here, and I want to be clear about our message, is that the priority is that participants have access to and are receiving these services like IR and clinic treatment. But just make sure you're getting paid for the services you are delivering, capturing, and then and receiving reimbursement for. Next slide, please. So again, communication and tracking data. Program staff need to work closely with the fiscal and billing staff, and we've seen some terrific practices in many of your programs where program leadership are working with the fiscal and finance leadership on a regular basis to compare notes, to compare numbers, to share updates, and so on. Is someone in the program tracking add-on component utilization to ensure add-ons are billed? We used to see programs who did a good job of this have a good report toward the 3rd or 4th week of the month. And what we're starting to see now that we're in a managed care environment is programs are starting to look at the add-on components and services at certain intervals during the month, perhaps halfway through the month, and then week 3, and then week 4. And again, it's just to make sure that you're capturing and submitting claims for everything you're doing. And if a participant's not participating enough in the program to bill, someone's below the 2 pros unit threshold, from an engagement perspective, what's going on with that person? There has to be a need for follow-up. And of course, again, you want to make sure someone has access to the appropriate care. Start looking at their needs on the IRP. But once they're engaged, just ensure that that you're it's another category of individuals that you need to track to ensure that you're billing for. Next slide, please. And finally, the receivables. There's some programs out there, as I said, with terrific monitoring and tracking systems in place. They use all the resources they have there, their EMR and care system. Staff communication is critical and so on, but what we've heard in many cases, which is unfortunate, is that because there's no communication with the fiscal and finance staff, that people weren't submitting bills. They weren't submitting claims to be reimbursed. So while program staff are doing a terrific job capturing and monitoring services delivered and add-on components, are you getting paid? And it's also consistent with Doug's point. Do an analysis from a particular month some time ago, pre-managed care, to see what your receivables were and compare it to today to see if there's a way to identify what the gaps are. Is there an internal practice for resubmitting denied claims? And does your program have someone that they're working closely with from each of the managed care organizations? And I'm thinking of a county in central New York that works with a couple of the managed care organizations, and they have a good routine in place where they understand each other, and they have agreed upon practices for the program to submit claims and for the managed care organization to then reimburse the organization for the claims that they submitted. And again, going back to this theme about program and billing staff communicating on a regular basis to, again, compare notes, to compare this analysis, and to follow up with each other. So not only is it important for program leadership to communicate with the leadership on the finance and billing side, it's important for all program staff, as Doug said, to really have an awareness around the pros unit, how the program bills, and it's also important for everybody up the leadership chain at your organization to have an awareness around how services are delivered, how they're captured, and then updating each other as you move forward about what's working with the managed care organization and what isn't. Because again, we want to hear from you, we want to know what's not working so that we can work together to move forward and help you receive payment for the services you are delivering. Next slide, please. And again, this is the slide that Jonathan had, but we thought it was important to have here twice because there are some helpful resources. Jonathan and Doug and the managed care division here, as well as the rehabilitation services group, we're working together. DOH has been very helpful and responsive to some of the issues you've brought to us, and we want to make sure that we can continue to have this open dialogue to resolve all of these issues moving forward. Again, thank you to NYAPRS. I want to especially thank Julie for helping facilitate this. And I hand it back to Edye.
Great. Thank you very much. There was a ton of information in there, and I am just going to make these questions larger for my old eyes so that I can read them. There were a lot of questions, and I just want to say a few things before I dive into them. One is that Julie will send out these slides. A number of people have asked for them. So, so you'll have all of the links that have been put up today, and she'll also send out the link to the recorded session so that you can share it with your billing staff, with your program staff, with your participants, with anybody else who you want to share it with. One thing I want to repeat over and over again: if you are calling Jonathan Mr. Mailbox, that's great. If you're emailing him, I think a lot of you are not emailing him. I've found a number of you have emailed me or McTack, and that's great. You can continue to do that, but we go right over to OMH, and they immediately jump on this. These folks are working hard to make sure you get paid, so I can't say enough how you have to let us all know, let them know, and if you prefer to let McTack know or let me know at NYAPRS, you can do that as well. But please let OMH know that you're not getting paid. Don't wait for, recently told me they hadn't received any payments since last June. Don't wait that long, because we can't stay alive when our revenues go down like that. So immediately let us know what's going on. Let OMH know. Call email Jonathan, email that mailbox, that OMH-manage-care@omhnewyork.gov, and let them know what's going on. So with that, I'm going to jump into some questions for you guys, okay? And hopefully Andy Kleek is unmuted and can speak as well. So I think we fixed that problem. Oh, great, Andy, terrific. So the question, what's the policy regarding authorizations with managed care plans for PROS clients that were admitted prior to the carve-in?
So there's a couple things to that. If a client was admitted prior to the carve-in and was receiving treatment prior to the carve-in, whatever, be it New York City or rest of state, the plans could not ask for or do authorization for the first 90 days. So there is a 90-day continuity of care period within the first 90 days of the transition. So that would have been until January 1st, 2016 for New York City, and then for rest of state it would have been October 1st, 2016. So that would have been the end of the 90-day periods for the appropriate region. At that point, the plan can then request and follow up to start authorizing services. But if you had an outstanding issue from that first 90-day period of time, the plan should not have asked for authorization. They could not have asked for authorization. If they did, then that would have been inappropriate. So it was a 90-day continuity of care period.
Yeah, and I just want to add, communication is key here. The plans could ask for concurrent review during that period of time. They might be asking you just what you're doing with the person. They're not authorizing the service.
And that's a good point, Doug. There were occurrences where some plans, because of the way their systems are set up, needed to put what was, I'm going to do quote unquote, I unfortunately can't see this, but quote unquote, an authorization number. Really what that is because their system didn't allow the claim to be processed without this identifying number. So what happened during the beginning of the transition period by the plans is they would outreach to providers of all types, not just pros, but in this case certainly pros, and they would ask for a list of clients, basically your roster, who's receiving services and what are their details, because that way they would then be able to generate that identifying number so they could attach it to their claims. And sometimes there was confusion. The plans wouldn't indicate necessarily why that was or weren't very clear because they'd call it an authorization number, but they're not supposed to request authorization. Subsequently, you might be uncertain what they were doing and didn't want to give out that information. But that actually was one of the side effects of working with various plans and their various billings and their various claiming systems and processing systems is sometimes they needed to generate this number. In that case, they really just needed a list of clients receiving services, and they'd be able to do that internally. They were actually requesting clinical records to do authorization during the first 90 days. That's wrong. But if they're just requesting the names of the clients in order to generate that identifying number in their internal system, that is fine. That was okay. But they couldn't do anything beyond that.
So let me also just say here that there are a lot of questions. So if your question is answered and you think that the rules weren't followed in your particular case, make sure you email Jonathan, okay?
Yes,
because I may not get to your comments at the bottom of this list before, we move on. So if whoever asked that first question, if that wasn't the case with you, and you actually were asked for an authorization and denied in the first 90 days, make sure you email. All right? Next question. If the PROS reimbursement rates are set in stone by OMH, is it appropriate for a managed care plan to reduce the payment on a CRS tier? For example, if we bill $719.77 service, can they pay $430 and state the payment was reduced based on the number of authorized units?
I'm trying to understand, is it a question that a number of units was authorized by the plan and were exceeded by the PROS program, and so the PROS program perhaps submitted a claim that was not within the authorization limits that had been provided by the plan, or are they saying that they got a different value paid than our posted rates?
It says that the reason that they got less money is because it was stated that the payment was reduced based on the number of authorized units. So I think that that particular person maybe should call you or email you on this specific issue, because can they reduce the number of authorized units?
Well, that's they certainly can send this question in, but it sounds like the units that were authorized allow them to achieve a particular tier. Well, let's say tier 2 for an example, and perhaps the actual number of units that they provided in a month would have placed the person in a tier 3. So perhaps they submitted a tier 3 claim, but it was paid at a tier 2 claim because that's what had been authorized. So you have to be careful with when you request authorizations for PROS from the plans that you are requesting what number of units of service, what tier you think you're actually going to provide. Some plans might, just say, well, we're going to authorize CRS or the base rate at any tier, and when you submit your claims based on your services in a given month, and we'll pay whatever that tier happened to be. Other plans might say, okay, you say you're going to do a tier 2. What's tier 2? 13 to 24 units, 27 units. So they might, authorize 27 units. You might have provided 30 units, so you submitted a tier 3, but they only authorized 27 units. But they certainly can send in more detailed information to the Jonathan Sauershell mailbox.
I suggest you do that, question asker, because I think you want to make sure that that you have it clear for the future. Okay. So the next one is we have a very specific billing code denial question. What exactly does denial code 1172-prepaid cap recipient mean, and how do we fix it?
That
Good one.
Normally, I would just say in general that's a type of denial code that would often come from like Medicaid fee-for-service, stating that a benefit is carved out of fee-for-service into a managed care plan. If a managed care plan is providing that denial, and the trouble with denials is sometimes they can mean multiple things, but it could mean that they're stating it's carved into the other side of things, so it's not part of the plan, it's part of fee-for-service, or it's not part of fee-for-service, it's part of the plan. That's what that would normally mean, which if you're billing a managed care plan for after the transition date for a client age 21 and older, then the plan would, in the members enrolled on a health plan, the plan would be responsible for that. If you're billing fee-for-service in that case, in that situation, then the plan would be responsible for that. So, without seeing it, I obviously can't provide a ton of detail, but, in general, that's what it would mean.
Right. I mean, I think that with a question like this, the first thing is the person should call the plan and ask the plan why they received that code. There could be many different reasons. If they don't get a good response, an understandable response, then I think they should communicate with the mailbox and perhaps attach the code. There could be a lot of different reasons, and Jonathan, tell me if I'm correct or incorrect in this. One of the things that happens early in the carve-in of services, or when somebody gets enrolled into Medicaid managed care, the Medicaid managed care company doesn't consider the person a member until they receive a premium, and there's this little gap.
There could be a lag
Right.
if it was early on, literally the first, week of the transition. There could
Right.
be a lag in the plan's recognition of that member, either as a member at all with the plan, or that their benefits are supposed to be paid through the health plan. So that it could be, while it didn't happen all the time, that did occur. It is one of the natures of systems and people and sort of changing over things, is there can be these sort of lag situations. So it's certainly a possibility.
Okay. Another person has asked 2 questions. I'm going to address the second one, which is that they seem to have a consistent problem having pros claims being processed accurately with one particular MCO. So I suggest that you contact the OMH mailbox about that if you have contacted the MCO and you can't get that taken care of. But the question for you guys is, we often have EPACES reports that tell us the client has managed care and the MCO says they do not. How can we resolve these types of issues, because they wind up being really time consuming?
Yeah, that does happen. How it works is the EPACES or eMedNY file is fed to the managed care plan twice a month. They feed them a file right before the first of the month, and then they also give them a secondary file in the middle of the month, sort of catching anybody they missed. So in those cases, if EPACES is showing enrollment for that particular month that you're inquiring about, and you've checked that EPACES recently, like current status, and it still shows that enrollment, that is considered the sort of the source of all enrollment data that the health plan gets. So in that case, I would state, and if you sent it to the plan and it provided them that information and asked them to check their rosters and they're still coming back saying they're not seeing it, well, first off, I'd say contact the plan and speak with somebody. Sometimes if you're looking through their online systems, their provider portal, their website, and trying to look up member enrollment, sometimes there can be a computer issue there. So I'd always state, contact somebody first. If you have that information from EPACES, contact the plan with that. Provide that to them if they ask for it, or sometimes even demand that you provide that to them so they can look at it. But if there's still a discrepancy past that point, EPACES is what's considered the record of truth. In that case, I would say contact us. We'll work with Department of Health, who actually have direct oversight and sort of to sort that out. It could be a matter of their secondary roster didn't update. It could be a matter that they're not checking their roster appropriately, even though they're supposed to. It could be a couple things, but if EPACES is showing that enrollment and it's linking that person to a health plan, and that client is age 21 and older, and it's a date of service past or a month of service past the transition month in your appropriate area, then that should be covered by the plan.
Right. I mean, there are probably odd occasions. This is why you have to communicate and send the information to the plan, in that a person may have at one point or another applied for SSD, and was awaiting to hear from that, and while they were awaiting, they were SSI only, and they were in a Medicaid managed care plan, and perhaps in the middle of a month their SSD came through, which made them a dual eligible, and perhaps they were converting back to fee-for-service Medicaid. So there are these odd things that happen occasionally on an individual basis, and that's why, again, I keep stressing it, is communicate, talk to the plan, find out why the plan sent you a code or denied a payment, and if you're not satisfied with that, then send it in to us.
And to kind of piggyback Doug's point there, you know, definitely call the plan, speak with somebody there before you sort of take the next steps. Because if you're checking, and I know a lot of people check the plan's online portals, and they are helpful tools. And I worked at a plan for 5 years, full disclosure, and you know the online portals can be very helpful. But sometimes, you know, due to the intricacies and the fun that is computers, and I think we all know how computers can be, sometimes their computer information isn't always the right way, or you're not getting the full picture. So it's always the first step. Speak with somebody at the plan. If you're a contracted provider, you have a provider relations representative at each plan you're contracted with. That should be your first point of contact. Ask to speak with their supervisor if it's not going the way you want. Having worked at a plan, those things should get escalated up the chain in that case. But at that point, after speaking with them and there is still an issue, and you have that ePaces thing that's still at that, and you looked at it on this date, at this very day that we're speaking, and it still shows that they're enrolled with the plan for that period of time, then contact us, because that's a discrepancy somewhere along the line in either the states or the plan system. But we tend to take ePaces as the truth, because that feeds to the plans to inform them of their enrollment. So.
Okay, we have a couple of questions similar to this one. So obviously this is an issue for folks. For established clients whose benefit plan has changed while enrolled in the program to an insurance plan where the agency is non-participating, how do I initiate a single case agreement? And as I say, I've got a couple of those.
I don't know, Andy, have you on? That might be more something that you're familiar with than us.
Yeah, so I'm not going to give a really satisfactory answer. The plans are required for a period of, I believe, 2 years to give single case agreements as necessary for clients who are existing clients if you don't have a contract with the plan. Each plan is going to be slightly different in the way in which they manage that. I would strongly encourage folks to go to contact if they have a direct representative with the plan, which if they don't have a contract they may not. But if not, go to our matrix, and you can look up all the plans and all the on the MCTEC website. Go to our matrix and look up on the plan exactly, you know, who you call for contract relations. Contact them, reach out to them, and set up that single case agreement. I would also suggest that folks, there's no reason why folks shouldn't work to initiate a contract with those plans as well, because it is likely you have more than one client, and single case agreements get really complicated really quickly. So there's no real reason not to have a contract with the plans. There'll be no difference in rates or anything like that. One other thing, Edye, just to say, if folks are looking for contact information for the plans as well as billing guidance, on our website we have our matrix, which gets a lot of traffic, so is a pretty accepted use in terms of all the contact information for all the different plans around the state and what plans are active in your area. We update that information regularly. It will not be perfect as people come and go and those kinds of things, but we do. It's probably the single best place to get contact information for individuals at the plans. And the second piece is we do have a tool that goes through billing guidance, literally field by field for the 837I and UB04 form, and you can literally hover over a field and it'll tell you what goes in there, and there is a link to the taxonomy in there that was referenced on the webinar as well.
Yeah, I will piggyback on that. It is an interactive tool. It is very, very useful, very helpful, so I would certainly, I think I pointed people to that in the past before for sure, and I use it myself, so it's a good sort of easy way to help understand if you're having questions about how to bill the actual claim. It's very good.
And the other piece is, just with that tool, is we developed that tool with the plans, and so it is a good thing to get on the phone with them and say, all right, you're saying that I put this in wrong, I put it in according to this tool which says this is how you guys accept the claim. You know, it's a nice kind of first step there. And sometimes we found things that their official policy was one thing and their computer was doing another thing, back to the computer issues that we raised earlier.
Great, and I'd like to also piggyback on that and say that I know that we're all so busy that we don't have time to go on the net and look for things. But the MCTAC website, it was redone, and it's a little more user-friendly now, and it's got huge amounts of stuff on it. And I work with MCTAC, and I'm still sort of surprised when I go on and start dancing around in there at how much information is on there. So I really suggest that at some point that you take the time to look through that, because it's the tools that were talked about, and then past webinars and resources and just all kinds of information that might be able to help you and your team to design quicker ways to get around some of these things, because they are time consuming. So I heartily recommend. So a couple more questions before we end, and we are not going to get to the bottom of these questions, so we are going to send them to Andy and to the OMH folks, and we're going to get the answers and send them back to you. So here's another goodie. What do we do if we're told that an authorization is not required, but when we bill it, it's denied for lack of authorization?
Oh.
Obviously, he's calling them, because obviously they must have called them and gotten no response. So,
yeah, that's. I mean, it's tough because every case is somewhat individual in its own regards. I would state, if they're saying an authorization is not required, first off, I would always state on your end of things to, double check our information on OMH's website to ensure that that is appropriate, because maybe the plan is saying it doesn't need authorization, but it really maybe should. On that web link that is on here, there is also, you can also get to our authorization requirements page or guidance. But if it doesn't need authorization, and the plan's saying it doesn't need authorization, and you maybe confirmed or know that it doesn't need authorization, and they still deny it, at that point, if you haven't contacted your provider relations representative, you can file an appeal on those claims with the plan. The plan has to have an appeal process for providers. It could have just been a system error. It could have just been some sort of connectivity error on their end. So if you file an appeal or you contact their provider relations or even their provider services call center, sometimes it sounds hard to believe, but sometimes they'll actually realize, whoops, that's our mistake. Let's reprocess that claim for you. But beyond that, of course, come to us then immediately. Don't let it drag on for 2, 3, 4 months. If you attempted through the appropriate channels to work with the plan and it's still not happening, and you have this denial and you have documentation, or who you spoke with and they said it doesn't need authorization, then please come to us. We'll then work with the plan. We'll ask them to look at their internal records. They should have a log of all of their phone calls they received. So if you spoke with somebody there in one of the service centers or somewhere, they actually keep phone documentation. And again, I know this having worked at a plan for 5 years, that documentation should be locked. It's unable to be changed once the representative types it in. And we can always go to the plan and ask them to pull that information and see what information was given. If it was misinformation, then the plan might be at fault. We can kind of unravel and untangle all of those strings at that point.
This is a situation that we've heard about, and we've heard some successes because of the provider working closely with the MCO to better understand what the service was and the fact that it didn't need authorization to deliver and then bill. But again, another opportunity to try to work with your MCO to educate them about the rehab model.
Great. Well, you know what? Our hour and a half is up, and there are many more questions. So I'm going to ask Julie to copy out all of these questions, and I'm also going to ask all of you on the phone, because there still are way over 100 of you on the phone. If you thought of any more questions, type them in, and if the webinar shuts down, type them and send them over to me or directly to the OMH mailbox. I'm going to get these questions to Doug and Liam, Jonathan, and Andy, and we're going to get answers for all of you, and then we are going to send them all out to you with the link to the webinar and the slides today. You know, I think that change is really hard, and we all know that. And some of us were just not ready. We don't have the staffing capabilities as small nonprofits. Some of us to be able to spend the time we now have to spend to get our revenue in. But I really, you know, as we started this webinar, as Harvey said, I want to thank all of you out there listening for all of the work and time you've put on moving our service system into this new managed care world and not losing the integrity of your services and the wonderful recovery work that we give through pros to the folks who come for it. So don't lose hope. And I want to also thank Jonathan, Doug, Liam, and Andy for being here today and really for being so responsive. And I want to say one more time that we are, you know, OMH is here, OASIS is here, MCTAC, NYAPRS, your other trade organizations. We're here to help you to get what you need to provide recovery services to people who still need and want to continue their journey. So you're not alone out there. Get your questions in. Make sure that you use that Jonathan mailbox. And thank you for coming today. And you know, and remember that that don't allow yourself to not be paid over an extended period of time. You heard it. You heard it first, right out of the mouth, OMH. So let's get those questions coming. And let's get this stuff into a way where we can be paid on a more regular basis and spend a little less time doing it. So thanks again, Doug, Liam, Jonathan, Andy. Thanks to all of you. And we'll see you again soon, I hope. And watch your emails. We'll get all this stuff out to you.
Thank you.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone, have a good day. We'll talk soon. Bye.